Thank you all. I'm so pleased to be here. I think you have one of the greatest groups I've ever met in this fight, and you're so blessed to have them here. I want to, before I get started, the other day I went online and looked up cancel culture to see what is being shown to anybody who just looks up cancel culture on Google or whatever. And here is the main thing that they have. Cancel culture has its place. It helps to call out and remove problematic people from mainstream culture. Let's call cancel culture what it really is. It's our way to exert some control over a world that is increasingly becoming more dangerous and less tolerant. In a cancel culture, we appoint ourselves the arbiters of right and wrong, and also the judge and jury, because thanks to social media, we get to dole out punishment. Now, that isn't cancel culture. That's gratuitous trashing of somebody that you just don't like what they say. And it's childish and it's nasty, but it's not cancel culture. But that's what you're going to find that most people think of cancel culture today. Cancel culture, like critical race theory, social justice, political correctness, and all the other buzzwords, is evil, destructive actions dressed up as deep intellectual theory. And while it's simple, it's also gobbledygook. There's no reason or logic or sound science in it. It's absolutely evil, effective, and difficult, if not impossible, to challenge head on. And I say that knowing major people who write about it and are trying to have an answer of how we address cancel culture. So I just wanted to tell you I'll be using a lot of quotes in the first part of my speech because I really want you to understand what cancel culture is. Milan Kundera, the author of The Incredible Lightning of Being, wrote, "The first step in liquidating a people is to erase its memory, destroying its books, its culture, its history. Then have somebody write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. The world around it will forget even faster." Do you feel like that's exactly what's happening today? Absolutely. We're being attacked by an enemy with two armies. One army is using the tools of cancel culture, and the second is using the tools of Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. But both are controlled by the same group of people, the United Nations and its co-evils, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the World Bank Group, the Fed, and many, many others. This is a cabal of evil working to destroy our minds and souls, just out to achieve Kundera's words. So what is cancel culture? Books are banned, even Tom Sawyer. Many of those are not banned, but if they are in electronic form, they're being edited and edited to be socially correct. White people are told they are oppressors of almost everyone else, people of color, women, even some white women, the poor, even those who do not know what gender they are. And the critical race theory solution is to make blacks the oppressors and whites the oppressed. Cities are trashed and some are burned. Our children are given lessons on sexual behavior, even in kindergarten. So where is all this coming from? Max Horkheimer, one of the designers of cancel culture, said, "The more freedom, the less justice." Think about that. The more freedom, the less justice. They believe that any kind of freedom allowing people to do anything, there can't be justice. But you have to look at their definition of justice. So, and you have to realize justice isn't really their goal. It never was and it never will be. So the tool of the left is using it to wipe out Western civilization by way of the Hegelian dialectic. You know the Hegelian dialectic? It starts with a thesis. It's a three-pronged thing. The thesis, which means they invent a wrong. You can't hear me?
Can you just talk a little louder?
Okay. So they invent a wrong. Racism in America. So they invent a wrong. Racism in America. Then they use Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and the others, and they take whatever time it takes and even staged events, and they use events that weren't even truly about racism, like Ferguson, for instance, and they foment anger and hatred. So that's the thesis. Then comes the antithesis of the dialectic. They pressure, usually the government, to make changes to correct the system, to make it more just. But understand, the government or other body is usually in cahoots with those who are putting the pressure on. This isn't about reality. This is about making a picture to look like this is happening and making it look like we, all the people, are in uproar and it needs to be handled. So this leads to the synthesis, that which is being destroyed. Here, it is shutting down the police, giving the rioters compensation for their time and work, often negating the constitutional rights and rule of law. Voila, the Hegelian dialectic as political tool. The dialectic is repeated over and over again. They keep finding a new issue to attack and a new thing to be settled, and it keeps moving on until we get to the left's nirvana, the destruction of America, and thus the rest of the Western world. The synthesis is never toward liberty or justice. It's always just another step towards communism. And the use of the dialectic is going on constantly. Each synthesis begets another and another. New ones are constantly being born in the minds of the Marxists. For almost 100 years, much of what has been going on behind the scenes and right in front of our eyes in Congress and in our state and local governments has been driven by the goal of transforming America into a communist satellite and using cancel culture as one of the main tools in this work. And cancel culture is just that. It is a tool in the asymmetric warfare, the guerrilla warfare, that has been a major aspect of our lives for decades, with few people realizing it. Ever since moral relativism and political correctness were introduced, but we were blissfully unaware. Shame on us. Because we weren't paying attention. It's no longer the camel's nose under the tent. The only thing left outside the tent is his tail. And we're getting there soon. As I said, it's a Marxist design tool for only one goal, and that is destruction. That is what the Hegelian dialectic is all about. It's only about destruction. It's never, they're talking about rebuild. Well, first you got to destroy to rebuild, and forget rebuilding after they destroy everything. So the Marxists of Germany, France, Italy, and Russia, along with people in America, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Ford, the Rothschilds, and many others, and their foundations, have been working for over 100 years to take down America and Christianity. America's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, are built on Christian principles. Thus, they're necessary for America's survival. If we don't hold on to Christianity, we don't have any foundation for those documents. So they're targets of Marxism. So we have a Marxist-designed and driven school was set up in Columbia University in New York City to educate educators, or rather to program them to teach our children and the future teachers and lawyers communism under many disguises. Those people I named above, along with John Dewey, an American, and Herbert Marcuse, another German Marxist, set up an agenda for our national education. And it includes directing education in the United States toward an international viewpoint, discrediting the traditions to which education formally had been dedicated. This is their words. Decreasing the dependency of education upon the resources of the local community and freeing it from many of the natural safeguards inherent in this American tradition. Changing both school and college curricula to the point where they sometimes denied the principles underlying the American way of life. Financing experiments designed to determine the most effective means by which education could be pressed into service of a political nature. The American Historical Association issued a report in 1934 which concluded that the day of the individual in the United States had come to an end and the future would be characterized by some form of collectivism and an increase in the authority of the state. Are we living there now? The Social Science Research Council pushed educational curriculum that serves to indoctrinate American students to forego the freedom of the individual and substitute the group, the will of the majority, and a centralized power to enforce this will, presumably in the interest of all. And some of the goals they expected, and remember this was decades ago, their agenda are to the creation of racism offenses, what we're living through right now, continual change to create confusion. That's political correctness, changing things all the time. That's also social justice. The teaching of sex and homosexuality to children. The undermining of schools and teachers' authority. Expanding immigration to destroy identity. The promotion of excessive drinking, and now that includes drugs. Emptying the churches. An unreliable legal system with bias against victims of crime. How many times do we hear about this right now? All the time. Dependency on the state or state benefit. Control and dumbing down of media. Duh. Encouraging the breakdown of family. This was written many decades ago. But we're living it now. They continually put it in little bit by little bit by little bit while we weren't paying attention. Now, there were people paying attention, and I want to tell you about one right now. In 1954, the Senate held hearings on those foundations I mentioned earlier, Rockefeller, Ford, Carnegie, and all, to determine if their funding was used properly and not instead to take down the United States. And their determination was that those foundations had indeed been working against the American people. And I quote from that report. From 1933 to 1936, a change took place was so drastic as to constitute a revolution. They also indicated conclusively that the responsibility for the economic welfare of the American people had been transferred heavily to the executive branch of the federal government. Keep that in mind. That a corresponding change in education had taken place from an impetus outside of the local community, and that this revolution had occurred without violence, with the full consent of an overwhelming majority of the electorate. In seeking to explain this unprecedented phenomenon, subsequent studies, they went on to study all this, pursued by the staff, clearly showed it could not have occurred peacefully or with the consent of the majority unless education in the United States had been prepared in advance to endorse it. Thus, influencing educational curriculum is of the utmost importance to advancing revolutionary policies. This was all in a report to our federal government. What came of it? What came of it? Later, the head of the Ford Foundation told Senator Norman Dodd, who was on that committee, and I might speak about Dodd a little bit later, but he said, Mr. Dodd, all of us here at the policy-making levels of the foundations have at one time or another served in the OSS, that's the forerunner of the CIA, or the European Economic Administration, operating under directives from the White House. We operated under those same directives. The substance under which we operated is that we shall use our grant-making power to so alter life in the United States that we can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Think about that, guys. This was all in Congress. People read about it. In 1965, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare commissioned Michigan State University to write a report, Behavioral Science Teacher Education Program, the B-STEP program. And if you read any of my articles, you've probably seen this, but it is designed not only to change our children's values, attitudes, and beliefs, but with far more malevolence, this program will make most of them into brain-dead slaves of Marxism. And just a few notes from this program that was put into all of our schools. The Protestant ethic will atrophy as more and more enjoy varied leisure and guaranteed sustenance. Universal basic income, anybody? Work as the means of survival up to the end of living will diminish in importance, except a few with exceptional motivation, drive, or aspiration. No major source of a sense of worth and dignity will replace the Protestant ethic. Most people will tend to be hedonistic, and a dominant elite will provide bread and circuses to keep social dissension and disruption to a minimum. You know, this bread and circuses we're giving every day from the mainstream media, it's to distract you from what they're doing behind the scenes, and you see it over and over again. A small elite will carry society's burdens, and this is still part of the B-step. The resulting impersonal manipulation of most people's lifestyles will be softened by provisions for pleasure-seeking and guaranteed physical necessities. Participatory democracy in the American ideal mold will mainly disappear. The worth and dignity of individuals will be endangered on every hand. Only exceptional individuals, again, will be able to maintain a sense of worth and dignity. Need to help students develop attitudes compatible with societal needs so they forget individual freedom. In other words, they're making us a country of useful idiots and useless eaters. I mean, that's what they're doing to us. And I want to do one last quote on education. During the 1973 International Education Seminar, Harvard psychiatrist Chester M. Pierce, speaking as an expert in public education, said, "Every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with certain allegiances to our founding fathers, toward our elected officials, towards his parents, toward a belief in a supernatural being, and toward the sovereignty of this nation as a separate entity. It's up to you as teachers to make all these sick children well by creating the international child of the future." This is our schools. This is our schools. So why is it that our culture needs to be erased? Because we believe in moral absolutes. And our national documents are based on those absolutes. Antonio Gramsci, one of the designers of the Hegelian dialectic, wrote in his prison notebooks, "Any country grounded in Judeo-Christian values can't be overthrown until those roots are cut. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture by way of infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media, by transforming the consciousness of society." Joseph Stalin said, "America's like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, it's morality, and it's spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within." Those three things are exactly why our culture needs to be erased if Marxist communism is to control the world. America is the last stronghold of the ideas that protect liberty, free market capitalism, and private property rights because we believe in them. As the authors of Remembering the Misremembered Left, and I recommend their book to everybody, but it's a little deep, every aspect of the left that threatens America today has its genesis in Marxist-inspired programs, from the critical theory of the Frankfurt School to the United Front efforts of the Soviet-led Comintern that in the 30s formed Antifa, the precursor to BLM, to interfaith penetration and more. Moreover, they are the foreseeable progressions of the left's historic mission. Marx and Engels wrote, "The social principles of Christianity preach cowardice, self-contempt, abasement, submission, humility. In a word, all the qualities of the canaille. Those are the dregs of society." In other words, Christians are the dregs of society. And Marx said, "The democratic concept of man is false because it is Christian. The democratic concept holds that each man is a sovereign being. This is the illusion, dream, and postulate of Christianity." So all these insidious attacks are also in the churches. And they will win the day for cancel culture and the cancel of liberty if they aren't dealt with soon. And it goes all the way to the top of many of the different Christian sects. Those who have been leading us to a world government understand that the beliefs of the people must be erased and replaced in order to exchange the old religions with one that will allow the world's leaders to control the worshipers. Pope Francis stated, "A global educational pact is needed to educate us in universal solidarity and a new humanism." Speaking about the two main threats to Marxism should suffice to show what the left is doing in every aspect of our lives. And I didn't go into Agenda 21. I'm giving you cancel culture, but Agenda 21 is the other tool they're using. The first target in changing human society is to cancel our culture, to cancel our moral absolutes and our reasoning abilities, the use of our minds. The second target, Agenda 21, is to take away our liberty, sovereignty, and the product of our minds. And these two armies have made major inroads to our very existence. Now, I hope that I have given you enough to understand what cancel culture is all about. But I want to bring to your attention that we don't have the government we think we have, and we haven't had the government we thought we had for a very long time. And I want to tell you about how our country canceled a rich ancient culture without firing a shot. During World War II, Chiang Kai-shek was one of our best allies, and he was keeping Southeast Asia democratic. He was holding off Russia. He was a fantastic ally. I mean, even President Roosevelt said so. And I say that, and you'll see why. But our government, I believe the deep state was operating back then, majorly, and General George Marshall had been put in as the president's liaison to the rest of the world, and he was somebody that was supposed to be drummed out of the army because he was so pathetic. He wasn't any good at anything he did. But he was great at taking orders and doing what the deep state wanted. So at Yalta, you always hear about Yalta. Well, in a back room at Yalta, Alger Hiss, a communist spy in our government, Andrei Gromyko, the Russian representative, and some minor little guy in the State Department wrote up the agreement that Russia wanted Manchuria because it has major natural resources. So they wrote up this document giving all of the use of Manchuria to Russia. They have major railroads there. Russia got 50% in charge of them. And China had a tiny Chinese Communist Party then, tiny. And they said that China had to share running the government with this Chinese Communist Party. But oops, they forgot to tell Chiang Kai-shek for days. This guy wasn't in on this talks, nothing. They gave China to Russia. And a big part of it was because Russia wanted to be in on the spoils of war, and our government wanted Russia to be in on the spoils of war. And Russia had wanted China and Japan, but MacArthur was in Japan, and excuse my language, but he said, hell no, Russia does not get Japan. And he kept them off of Japan. But Russia got everything he wanted in China. He got so much in in Eastern Europe. We gave him everything. They waited for the Russians to get there. But the big thing about China was that they delayed the war in China because Russia didn't have enough people in his army to come over there and pretend to be helping us. And at all this time, Japan was sending out peace feelers, but we weren't taking them because they wanted Russia in on this. This is our government. This was our government back then. If we can betray one of our greatest allies, we got to accept. They can betray us totally. And the interesting thing is, this morning when I was at the hotel, I looked up online the Federal National Historian. And let me tell you, you should look it up. Their story about Yalta stinks to the high heavens. And where I got all of my information on the China stuff is from Joseph McCarthy's book, America's Retreat from Victory. And I recommend it. It's a short book, and he used only people who were even with or positive toward General MacArthur. And this book is phenomenal. I mean, there's a lot of good books out there, and that was written decades. This guy was a hero, so they cancel cultured him and made him an enemy. McCarthyism is disgusting. This guy, all the communists he talked about, he didn't know all of them. So he was great, but most people think this guy was bad. And I just wanted to show you this story about China. Now, we have had our Yalta situation when Agenda 21 was signed off in 1992 by George Herbert Walker Bush in Rio de Janeiro, and I think, 197 other governments. When he came back to the United States, found out, no, the Senate wasn't going to give him a thumbs up in the advise and consent thing. So they pulled a Yalta on us. He gave the treaty to Clinton, who gave it to Al Gore, who was one of the major people on the left, who put it into the President's Council on Sustainable Development and put every aspect of Agenda 21 first into our federal government, where it trickled down to our local and state governments. This was our Yalta. They did not allow this to Senate. The Senate doesn't ratify, it just gives advice and consent. But if they say it's okay, we consent, then the two states, America and the UN or whatever, agree with it. But I just wanted you to understand, we live in Alice's Wonderland. Nothing is as we think it is. So what are the answers? And I have just a few. Education. Get your kids out of the schools. The schools aren't there to teach them anything. They're there to indoctrinate them into being good little communists, period. And it's not hard to homeschool because there's a lot of people out there that teach classes in it. If you want to talk about it to somebody afterwards, this woman raised 9 kids. She homeschooled all of them. And let me tell you, I know a bunch of them, and they are fabulous. They know their Constitution. They understand what America's about, and they're willing to fight for it. And we have to take over our school boards. But that'll be done in the third part I'm going to tell you. Our pastors need to be doing 2 things. They need to be teaching from the Bible and the Bible only. You can't try to be nice and say, yeah, we're going to be having same-sex marriages in this church. You can't go trying, excuse my language, kiss up to people that are there to destroy what you stand for. And they need to be challenge those other pastors. That's one of their jobs, challenging them to speak out, because they aren't going to lose their 501c3s from speaking out. And if they do, tough. But it doesn't happen just because you speak out. The third thing is to set up what we call freedom pods, and that's what our workbook is about. How to take back your city, county, state. You start with, first, making sure you have a constitutional sheriff. You start getting your own people elected to office, and you don't count on vetting people. If you don't know them or you don't have a friend that can testify for their integrity, you don't support them. Because I guarantee you, there are tons of people serving right now that were vetted and vetted and vetted, and they said all the right things until they got into office, and it didn't matter anymore because it doesn't count. You have to, and this is where we then take back the school boards and get the federal government out of the schools, take back your county, take back your state, get rid of all the unelected offices, and we have to make sure that our people are elected even in the tiniest offices. We have to, because this is a cancer. Communism, cancel culture is a cancer. And no matter how little bit of it's left, it's going to grow. Also, we have to make sure we have our voting cleaned up. You have ID. You have one-day voting. You have paper voting. All these things we let slip by, and then this past year, we've seen them all in your face because they figure that we're already dead and gone. We're just walking, useless eaters. So I just want to close with another Milan Kundera quote, because he says what I think people should know. The worst thing is not that the world is unfree, but that people have unlearned their liberty. Thank you.
Kathleen, you touched about the local politics. Express to us just how important it is, because people come out for the main elections and they think that's where their power is, and they don't do anything here.
The swamp no longer counts for anything. The swamp is lost. We have to save our local areas. We are in a place where you have to remember our economy is shot. It is so ridiculous, and the only reason it's still holding up is because the powers that be are keeping it alive so that when they want to wipe us out, they're going to let it go. Because if in real life, it would have crashed years ago. But, so only in your local area are you going to be existing in a little while. That's why I say, you got to save your city and county. You've got to get your neighbors to understand you're all going to be relying on each other, whether it's for food or protection or whatever. We are living in interesting times. And I wish I were 40 years younger facing this, but we have to know what's coming. And if you don't really understand what's coming, start asking questions. Call me up, email me. I'm at contact@americanpolicy.org. That's my email address. What we are facing is what you can read in 1984. Brave New World, Animal Farm. And those people that wrote these books were part of what designed what we're living in now. They knew what was coming on. They understood. So your local area is so critical to you. But if you have, like what we have right now in Knoxville, a communist city mayor, and most of the city council is right along with her, you're going to have to work on it. We have 5 seats that are going to be empty this election, and we have at least 4 of the seats we have people running now. And this is what you have to do. You start at the bottom. Even city attorney, run somebody for city attorney. You see all these offices. When you get your ballot, here's an office, and there's only one person running. Go sign up for any office. You can learn it if you don't know it. I mean, we know a whole lot more than they do. I mean, seriously. So, sorry, I'm trying to. I get too worked up, sorry.
How do you go about a government like we have in Memphis that is totally corrupt? I mean, we can't just start with one person at a time. Literally, all of them need to be replaced. I don't trust any of them. They all have the same talk, but they don't do the walk. And, you know, how can we literally replace them as quickly as possible?
And that's a big problem because you have to go after each of the seats that they're in. What happened is, back in the 60s, the left read Rules for Radicals and believed everything Saul Alinsky said, and they went in and they took over all these offices. And they had plenty of time to do it because we were busy earning a living and raising our kids and wanting to live and let live and not tell everybody else how to live. But now you're going to have to do it this way. You're going to have to. But I'm telling you, if you can work up your neighbors and get them to understand what's going on, it is amazing how many people are awake or awakening and are willing to jump in. You start, like Darlene said, she would love to, host one of these little groups, but she doesn't want to be the talker. But if you want to do it, you get one of these people to come in and talk to the people about how exactly to do it, because I know that the Campaign for Liberty people are fantastic, and they're going to help you. And all you have to get a little flyer, have it written up. They might be able to write one, or I'll write one for you. Just contact me. And a flyer to give to your neighbors. It's not going to be flaming, screaming like I end up doing in all my speeches. It's going to be explaining it nice and easy. Here's what's going on, and here's what you can do. Because people understand there's something wrong, but they don't know how to address it. That's because we're all individuals. they are already a collective. So all they have to do is go in a big movement. We have to start taking control of some of their tools. So contact somebody.
In 1948, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that declared that there was a separation of church and state. In 1962, I believe it was Engel versus Vitale that took prayer out of school and ushered in basically atheism. Now, a year earlier in 1961, Tocaso versus Watkins, footnote number 11 declared that atheism or humanism was a form of religion. So what we need to do is convince the electorate that the humanism that's in the schools now is definitely a violation of the Constitution because it is a replacement religion being foisted upon to the children in school. How can we go about convincing the local residents of the need to address that in the school boards?
Well, I would say you should, and you and your daughter, I think, could very well write it up quite well and spell it out. And like I say, if you want help, contact me. I'm not a lawyer, but I can help you write it. And then you can share it, because you don't want to, this is not an in your face. I'm telling you what's going on and you need to hear it. We're going to be polite, we're going to be nice, and we're going to explain to them what's going on. And if they want to fight it, they will. If they don't, you know which ones you don't. I know which ones I'm not sharing my chicken's eggs with. I mean, that's, so it's, like I said, it's being able to put into words what you want to say. And if you start writing it, like me, it might take you 4 or 5 times to get it written up how you want it, but just explain it so it's not an in-your-face thing. Just explain, this is what happened, and here's what's really true about the Constitution, the separation of church and state, all that issue. Just put it out and put it in constitutional writing. Okay?
Anybody else?
Come on, guys. Did you understand cancel culture? Did I make it understandable? I mean, how understandable can gobbledygook be? But I mean...
Do you think this, the other side is coordinated by a very small, tightly held group? And if so, who do you think they are? Is there a, Illuminati, or is there a very tight group controlling, this move toward socialism and Marxism, or is it just moving that way of its natural accord? Or is it who is the tight group that's at the top of this other side?
It's the Marxists, and it's those who want power. And if it goes up to the Illuminati, it's probably them. But there are so many people that are with them. I don't know all that stuff about Illuminati. I just know that there are so many, Bill Gates has got to be one. George Soros. They want power. Klaus Schwab. And what we're seeing right now is this plan was to be finished in 2050. But I think some of the older ones, like Klaus Schwab, want to see it be completed in their lifetime, so that's why they're trying to move it up to 2030. And that's why they're making mistakes, like with the COVID stuff and all the mistakes that have been coming out of that. But it is not a big group of people that are behind this. Yes, it's the British aristocracy, the world bankers, George Soros, It was Maurice Strong when he was still alive, David Rockefeller. It's all those the foundations I talked about. The mega rich are the ones that are behind it.
Okay.
Yes, what information can you give us about the Great Reset 2030?
The Great Reset
Thank you.
was set up just to rush Agenda 21 all the way through to its completion. The Great Reset was written, obviously, at least more than a year before it came out, but it came out within, 3 months of COVID being on the scene. And it is just to push Agenda 21 all the way through, and the fourth industrial revolution is part of that. It's AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, to take total control of your minds. And I just want to mention a little thing. I don't know if all of you have this happen to you, but if you say something to somebody, like I told my friend, I'm still thinking about getting a law degree. And what comes in on my email today, would you like to buy, we suggest these law books for you. I mean, this happens, you see it, other people get it. It's not just me, it's happening. How dare they know this much about us? And the only thing I have on my computer and my cell phone, I don't have a television, I don't have any smart thing in my house, but yet they hear what I say, and I keep getting, if I say something to somebody, pretty soon I'm going to get an email or a suggestion, one of those ads they send you. And it's scary, but they're already getting, as soon as they get 5G through, 5G will do all of the AI that am I right? The 5G will finish us off, if not through expanding the infections in our bodies, it's going to finish us off by them having control of our minds. And we think that's far-fetched. Hey, we thought a lot of things, as she was saying, they watched, what is that? The Jetsons, the Jetsons? And they had all these kids were watching little screens for their schooling and all the things that were in the Jetsons. She said, are now out there and we're living them. So, sorry, I don't have TV. I didn't have TV, so I don't know. Come on, guys. I like questions because I need to know what I didn't talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is more of a clarification. Can you clarify between that Agenda 21 is not 2021?
Okay,
But
Agenda 21, the Millennial Goals, Agenda 2030, the Green New Deal are all the same. They're all Agenda 21. They just keep renaming it, so you think, oh, and this group now is doing a lot of the same things, so this must be really necessary. We need to push this, because look at all the interest there is in this. So, no, it's all the same. If you look at the Green New Deal, I think the first pillar of the Green New Deal is economic, to destroy our economy. Well, what's Agenda 21? To destroy our economy, to make us poor. Agenda 21 wants to take away 50% of the land mass goes to the animals. It's to redistribute our wealth. It's to wipe out 92% of the human population, which they plan to do with the vaccine, which they'd like us to start a civil war, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do a red flag event and say it was us, like the Capitol, the January 6th thing. All of this is attacking everything we believe in. And this Agenda 21, in 1976 in Vancouver, they had Habitat 1, which basically spelled out exactly what was going to be in Agenda 21, redistribution of wealth, taking away our land, all that. And who was listening? Tom and I just want you to know, my tinfoil hat is now it's invisible. But I still wear it. But we have been made so much fun of, and now they're up front. They're up front. Everything that we've been saying for years, the left is up front about. Oh yeah, this rah-rah, we're pushing this, we're pushing that. And yet, half of the people or more in Washington, D.C. on our side will never mention the word sustainable development or Agenda 21, even though they know. It's like they are so afraid of being marginalized. They should be afraid of being erased. But, sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What part do the communist Chinese play in this new world order? The communist Chinese, how do they fit into this?
Let me just give you my opinion, because I don't have research that tells me. But after what we did, the story I told you about what we did in China and Russia tells me that, I mean, look at all of the people in the federal government that are making billions in China right now, and we're saying they're dangerous. In 1945, do you remember when people were saying, our government people were saying, oh no, Russia's dangerous. Russia, we have to worry about ABC warfare, atomic, biological, and chemical warfare from Russia. And I'm going, wait a minute. We just gave Russia a big chunk of the world, and they're our allies, and now we're afraid. That's total hogwash. What it is. So how do you know what China, and I think China and the deep state of America are working to wipe out us together. I think they're in it to come in and yeah, if China bombs us, oh well, good. There's a bunch of useless eaters down the drain. I'm opinionating now, not.
That's good.
I'm not a military expert.
Okay, what remaining Protestant denominations have not been crossed over to the wrong side? According to Todd Stearns, the Baptists have become woke or something like that.
I'm sorry.
What remaining Protestant denominations have not crossed
over
over?
to the other side?
Correct.
I'm not an expert on that, but in my opinion, there are churches that are in denominations that have crossed, but the churches haven't. There are separate churches, and that makes sense because it's like everything else in the whole country right now. There are states that have really good people in them, but their governments are pretty bad. I mean, you look at there are churches in Knoxville that I know that are really good, that are in denominations that have signed on to the Universal Religious Initiative, the big World Bank. We're going to have the perfect church that feeds all people, all religions. So I think it's just like the rest of us. It's little pockets out there, not any one. I don't know any one big denomination that stayed clean.
Oh, here, I'm sorry, Bernie.
Run, run, run.
With a twisted knee, run.
I was just going to make a comment on the churches. If you can find a church that has given up their 501c3, they have separated themselves.
They have.
Yes, because no church is required to be a 501c3. Churches are automatically independent from the government, from taxation, from anything under the Constitution. But what they've done is the attorneys have convinced them they have to be 501c3s in order for their parishioners to get tax deductions. That does not have to happen, nor with a nonprofit. You just have to get a letter from your church saying that you contributed, and it's deductible, yeah.
But that's just like the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment tells us we have the right to carry. We don't need the state to give us a license to carry. The churches, pardon?
And Tennessee just did it.
Yep, well, to a point. But we shouldn't have that because, remember, this is a right that the government is supposed to support. This is not a privilege from the government. They didn't give us this privilege. This is our right. And these are God-given rights, and nobody should be able to touch them. So we have to understand, but if we don't uphold them and force the government to uphold them, we cede them.
Anybody else? Somebody? Oh, here.
I just have, I guess, you spoke of 5G and how dangerous it is, and there's little groups that are against that, and it's so hard to see where to begin to fight unless we're looking at local school boards, local governments, and things like that. But 5G is a big thing, and it's a good place to start to fight, but I can't see that we would ever stop that. What is your opinion on, could you ever stop 5G?
There are really good groups out there fighting 5G. And I guess about a year and a half ago, there was a wonderful conference in Australia on 5G. Did you see it?
No, but I'm not in Australia. It's something that
No, but it was on TV here. You could download
your
it.
fist around, I'm not, and smart meters came and went, and I don't want a smart meter. And that goes along, I thought, with 5G, because we're all gonna be under the umbrella of being controlled.
It's all part of the smart grid. And did you just read in Texas where they use people's smart meters to change the temperatures in their house? They raise the temperature. And we told people this for the last 25 years that this was going to happen. Oh, no, it wouldn't happen. But the problem, there's a lot more problems with 5G, and I'm not an expert, but it's really, really bad for you. Not only that they can control, they can find everything you do, they can watch everything, but it's bad for your body. But if you want to know, contact me, contact@AmericanPolicy.org, and I'll give you the groups that are fighting 5G, because we're a small organization, so we can only do so much.
Yeah, it would be, that's some place where I think I can make a stand. I'm against 5G, that's a place.
Good.
I'm not gonna run for office.
Great.
Here we go. One more.
Going along on the 5G thing, can you explain to us the Internet of Things and how that is related to 5G? And maybe General Petraeus said that we're listening to you through your refrigerator and your washing machine. You familiar with this?
Remember what I just said about when I say something and I get messages on my phone about that exact thing? Yes, they're listening to you. Yes, they're listening. The Internet of Things is everything is connected. Everything is. I think it was, I don't remember if it was Toronto, one city in Canada, they were going to put sensors even in the pavements, in the sidewalk, so they could know every place you were. They're putting sensors in everything. They're spying on us. And the Internet of Things is just pulling all the things together, like smart cities, and it's just to have total control. Total control.
How big of a role do you think that the World Bank is playing in all of this that's happening in America right now?
Pardon?
How big of a role is the World Bank in everything happening in America?
How big of a role? They're at the top. They're at the top with all of the rest of the evil people. The UN, George Soros, Bill Gates, World Bank has been in there. The world bankers, not the World Bank, but they're part of it, financed both sides of the war in the World War II, and they didn't care which side won because they were going to be controlling either side. But you have to understand, they've been part of this whole machination since Cecil Rhodes, started his big thing. It's all of the world's rich people just want more, and they want control. And they want to get rid of us, because look at us. Who are we? I mean, come on. I think we're fabulous. But
yes. You mentioned in your talk that you believe that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were founded on a belief in God. And you also mentioned several times about the effectiveness of Christianity. And I just wondered, what part do you think religion is going to play in the recovery of this nation?
well, let me say this. If Christianity is wiped out, we're wiped out. And if we're wiped out, Western culture is wiped out. Because Christianity is the foundation. The Declaration says all men are created equal. It's a God-given right. The Bill of Rights come from the Ten Commandments. Without that, we don't have those vehicles, the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. So we need the churches. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. The research shows today that something like, I believe, only 35% of the people in this country now are actively involved in churches. It used to be about 70%. And if you look at that, you ask the question, how are we going to turn that around? I mean, because it looks like we're definitely going down the road of destruction as far as religion playing a significant part in the recovery.
Well, think about Gideon's army. How big was Gideon's army? It wasn't very big. We don't need a whole lot of them, but we need really Bible-believing Christians in order to stop this. We don't, the people that fought in the Revolutionary War, what was it, 3% or something? We don't need a whole lot, but the ones that we have got to speak out. They've got to stand up and speak out. And yeah, it's hard. Let me tell you, it's hard. When I was fighting against animal rights, I would go into the grocery store in Bethesda, Maryland, and people would follow me around the grocery store screaming, effing murderer, effing murderer. And the other shoppers are looking at me like I'm the one that's doing something wrong. They would threaten me. They threatened my children. They tried to break into our house one time. But you either stand up or you say, okay, I'm a worthless nothing and I don't need to be here. If you just learn that you have to stand up, it isn't hard. It isn't fun, let me tell you. I have been vilified enough They used to always scream at me whenever I'd be anywhere at the circus or anywhere. Kathleen. I used to hate my name the way they said it. But they threatened me, and because they threatened me, I was not going to back down. So all we need are Christians that are willing to stand up. We need patriots that are willing to stand up. And it doesn't take a lot. But you have to know your enemy. You have to know what they're about. Even if it's gobbledygook cancel culture, you got to know what it's about. And just if you start looking at these people that are out saying things, just stand up to them and question them. They don't have answers. Antifa and Black Lives Matters, they have no idea what they're supposed to be standing up for. So just challenge them. Look, I'm an old lady. If I can do it, anybody else can do it.
We have an old lady question here.
Kathleen, I have an acquaintance who didn't understand about animal rights situation, someone who just hadn't approached that before, and they were concerned that, oh, well, I want animals taken care of, which is, of course, a heartwarming thought. But the idea of what PETA has done, the idea of giving rights so-called to animals over people. In other words, let's shut down the farmer because he's got some kind of lizard on his property and he can no longer plow the land. That sort of concept. Could you give a thumbnail sketch of why animal rights versus people rights were your issue, please?
Well, we all care about animals. We want them treated well. But that's called animal welfare. And what does animal rights stand for? You look at the animal rights leaders, and they're the only ones that count because they're the ones that make the rules and decide where the money goes. And they are using a fight for rights for animals, so animals can't have rights because who's going to stand up for them in court? Is it going to be the farmer that knows them really well, or that civil animal rights lawyer who hasn't had a pet because they don't believe in having pets? But they'll try to say they'll stand up for that. But animals don't have rights. Rights is a human construct built upon reasoning beings. So the main point that animal rights supporters, those average supporters that have 5 pets apiece, that animal rights is against pet ownership. Pet ownership to them is an abomination brought about by human manipulation. So they're trying to do, their whole goal is to attack man using a fight for rights for animals. They want humans erased off the earth. And I'll give you a quick thing on how you can understand it. There's a group called the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement, which says, don't you think a world without people would be so much better? The reduction of humans on the earth would be perfect for the earth and all the living beings on it. That if you look at the truth, animals would overproduce and die off. I mean, they Wild Horse Island had horses on it, but they were allowed to do whatever they did, and they ate all the food, and they all died, all of them. So animal rights people don't care about animals. That Peter Singer, who wrote the book Animal Liberation, says in the preface of his book, well, he used to say in updated versions they have erased that because I used it against them, but my wife and I don't really care about animals. We don't love dogs and cats and horses like other people do. Now, here's the father of the animal rights movement. What more do you need? PETA kills their animals. They just pocket the money and put it in accounts down in the Caribbean. Oh, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, but the E is in lowercase, and you understand why.
All right, well, let's give her a round of applause and tell her thank you. Great talk.